Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this is Brad from EastCoastAngel, and today I'm going to be doing a teardown on a G7 Fly. Now, to kind of put it right out there right now, I absolutely love the G7 Fly platform. I like the G7 platform and all of the other associated platforms. The one thing I am not fond of is the 90-degree frame. I've never been able to get used to it, and I prefer the 45 over the 90. But we have today a really nice example of Angel's fade. I think they did some of the best anos, on the market, when you could, really. Back then, you could really get a really nice looking fade from them. I think they did a great job with it, and I'm kind of glad to have this one in-house and be able to do the teardown with it. So let's get right to it. First thing I like to do is I like to kind of give you a rough, rundown of what I have for tools. I like having a gauge handy, be able to adjust the LPR. That way we can get it to shoot perfect, like they all do anyway, but we like to make sure that they shoot, tip top, nice and soft, fast. And in order to do that, you have to have a gauge. I like using the Angel A1 toolkit, mainly because of the fact that it has all the sizes that you need, and everything, including the threaded tools, in which there's a reg cartridge, and you can thread the smallest one right into the bottom of the cartridge and then pull it right out. I think that's pretty slick. And let's see, my trusty wooden spoon, it's actually starting to get kind of beat up a little bit, but I use this for pushing the internals out, mainly because it doesn't scratch and it doesn't damage the inside. If you happen to scratch or gouge the inside, you're going to find that the sealing properties of the O-rings may or may not do their job anymore. And I would recommend using, a dowel or a squeegee when pushing out your internals. Nothing, metallic. Next thing I try to, tell people, a pick tool is always awesome, mainly because you can get your O-rings off without having to really, there's all kinds of tricks. People will say you can squeeze them, you can pull them out, whatever. But a pick tool works great. Plus, it also allows you to get into small little, nooks and crannies to be able to kind of clean out, areas that I normally wouldn't be able to, even with like Q-tips and stuff like that. Again, a pick tool is really nice to have. The circlip in the reg is kind of a pain if you don't have either jeweler's pliers or the circlip pliers. You can buy one of these at any hobby shop, and if you want to get actual like circlip pliers, you can get those at like Home Depot or Lowe's, or any other hardware store will have them. And I like to use Eclipse grease, mainly because it's readily available at all paintball places, including places that may not sell Eclipse like as its main marker, or soft goods. They usually have the grease. Right here I have a small threaded rod, and that's going to be able to pull the breech pins out. Gotta kind of have to have that if you want to do a full teardown. And then of course I've got my trusty Leatherman tool, in which I use to tap the internals of the reg out. I like it because it's nice. It's a nice flat surface and it's hard, and it's literally been in every video I've ever made, which is really cool. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and move these things off to the side that I'm not going to use right away. As I go through, I'm going to kind of give you like tips and tricks, and hopefully you'll be able to learn a few things. All right, first thing I like to do is I like to take off non-essential things, which would be the ASA. There's no reason for it to stay on here. We have what am I going to say? Most guns that come in have one, but you know, there are some that you know, just kind of will come in bare, which is fine. If you happen to send your gun in, you don't have to add anything like a barrel or an ASA, just because of the fact that I have plenty. And you know, the next thing, especially with the G7 you know, platform, you know, where it's like you've got your red cartridge inside the housing, everything, I like to go and start with the frame. You know, in most of my other videos, you'll notice I will start with like the reg and take it off, but this is all like one unit, so I kind of want to go ahead and start here and then work my way you know, forward on the bottom of the gun. There's 3 screws that are holding the grip panel on. You just go ahead and undo those. These are metric Allen keys, by the way. You can use regular you know, Allen keys if you want, or you know, US, but you're gonna find that they're not gonna fit as well. The only time I ever use you know, regular or American Allen keys are when my metric ones are not working, mainly because you can step up a size sometimes or go down a size, and at that point you may be able to get the you know, the screw out at that point. So right now I'm going ahead and I'm unplugging the eyes, and I'm unplugging the solenoid and the battery. The one thing I do want to point out on this gun is it has Dox laser eyes, which are excellent. They're a great replacement, you know, or upgrade, mainly because you can pick all kinds of different colors. He also has a great you know, warranty on them. If for some reason they fail, you just send them in, he sends you another pair. You know, but the one thing I did want to point out is typically these will have ribbon eyes from Angel, and they're very, very brittle. They will look similar to this right here, and typically what happens is you get separation at the solder points, or you get pinching, where it will sever one of the lines, or this little doodad likes to just break off. All of these electronics are starting to get some age to them, so don't be surprised if your you know, your eyes are kind of beat, and or when you're taking them apart, they fall apart, because I've seen them before where I've been super gentle, and literally the LED part has been like, it just stays inside the eye recessed area, and like the ribbon will come right off, and it's just unfortunate, but it is what it is, and that's why we have replacements, and that's why we have upgrades. So right now what I'm doing is I'm undoing the frame. You know, there's two screws that hold the frame to the body. The one thing I want to kind of point out is, you know, recently, I mean, I've been doing this for 7 years, and throughout I've noticed that people like to over torque screws. Your frame screws are no exception. Everyone torques them down like it's sealing some sort of component. It isn't. Essentially, it's just, you know, these two right here, and if you notice on the frame, they're recessed, and what that, you know, tells me is if there's a screw that's stripped in there and it needs to come out, that's going to be kind of tough. So when you're taking any screws up, you know, off your gun, if you happen to notice that they're starting to strip around, take them and throw them away, and then get new ones, because you're going to at one point forget that that one screw is stripped, and you're going to try to remove it, and it's just going to get even worse. You're probably going to get frustrated, and then at that point other things happen, bad things. I've seen people literally lose their marbles with a stripped screw, and it's unfortunate because I've also seen people damage guns because they just, you know, they lose it and they get upset. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the board out. It is held on with two screws. They are Phillips. And this particular, you know, model has all the stock stuff in it. So you're going to notice that there's the leaf for the trigger, which goes in here. But Angel did the smartest thing ever, and they made the board where the trigger goes open in the back. So you can take the board up and out without any issues. You couldn't do that with some of the other boards because the buttons would get in the way, and you'd kind of have to finagle and mess around. Plus you had the trigger, which is kind of, blocking, a really, good, easy up and out. But they fixed that, and they made it really nice. So you can leave the trigger in the gun frame, and you can drop the board back in, if you want to, and it's literally, not going to be an issue. I thought that was really kind of cool when they first started doing that. I was kind of happy. So we'll go ahead and, as you can see, I'm kind of accumulating and putting all my screws off to the side. I tend to try to do that just because I like them to be all in one area. If I start spreading stuff out, trust me, all it takes is you lose, some stuff once, and you're going to take notice, later on how you're, keeping your area. The one thing I have seen, and I thought it was really cool, is people will sometimes pick up, they go to AutoZone or VIP or whatever, and they'll pick up one of those magnetic trays, to put their screws and stuff like that in, which is nice because, then you don't have to worry about losing stuff. So right now what I'm doing is I am loosening up the trigger hold down screws. I'm not going to take those out completely. There's really no need. They can just stay right in there as long as you can get the trigger out. One thing I did want to point out while I had it out, it felt the trigger kind of gave me kind of like a sticky feeling, like when I was just testing it out. And the bearings are starting to get some rust inside them. I can see it from here, and the pins, it's starting to get some grit on it, and it's notchy. There's really not much you can do about that. The one thing I can say is I have replacements. I have brand new bearings and the cross shaft that goes in them. And believe it or not, it's one of those things that's kind of rare. The bearings usually last a long time in these guns. So if you do happen to come across that, I have all the parts to be able to swap those out. So you can go ahead and leave a comment below if you want, and you can give me a shout, and we can take care of you at that point if you want to replace those. This one's got the Fly. It's got a couple of set screws for your trigger adjustment. It's only got one vernier wheel, and it's got a magnet, whereas the G7 has two posts. You'll be able to tell, the differences are subtle, but they're there. And again, I think the G7 platform in stock form has an amazing trigger, just because they use the right magnets, they use the proper adjustments, and I think that that's just half the battle sometimes, is getting a really good trigger feel. And I thought the opto board or the optical board was amazing, because it only used a break. The trigger would go in between here, and it would break the beam, that the eye, that's installed in the board. It would just, break it, and that was all it took. And again, you can make the triggers super, super light. You can make them nice and firm if you want. They're one of the most adjustable triggers stock that you can get. And like I said, I can't say enough about them. They were just a really good feeling trigger. Right now what I'm doing is taking the feed neck off, mainly because of the fact that, sometimes, it doesn't have to come completely off, but this one's had a different feed neck on it already. So that's why it came off as easily as it did. The one thing you want to do is you always want to inspect the threads. If you need to, you can use like a pick tool, and you can go through the threads, and you can take out the old thread lock. Angel was known for really cinching those things on there with thread lock. Like I said, this one came off, you know, relatively easy because it had a different feed neck installed. But you always want to take these apart and give them a good washing. It's just plastic and rubber, no big deal. Soap and water. Same thing with the feed neck too. Make sure you clean out the threads. You can, you know, essentially you could take a Q-tip or you can take a paper towel and you can just kind of, you know, put a fingernail in there and just run it as you're going around and clean the threads out. Mainly because of the fact that I have a feed neck that I absolutely was crushed when I realized that somewhere along the line there was a damaged thread in here. Now, I could go and fix it. I just haven't yet, but it literally will only screw in that much and then it stops. And it's unfortunate because it's in really good shape and it came off of a A4 Fly, and I'd like to have it in good shape. So sooner or later I'll clean up the threads and then I'll have it back to normal. But just, you know, word from the wise, when you're, you know, putting these on and you're, you know, putting the two pieces together, always make sure that they go on, you know, properly. And I mean, this one's, you know, the threads are, you know, super clean. This gun actually came from a buddy of mine. His name's Jason, and he takes really good care of his guns. This was used, so I mean, it's got some, you know, scratches and dings and dents and stuff like that. But the fact is, you know, in his possession, couldn't have asked for anything better. I mean, the guy takes care of all of his stuff, which is awesome. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the front regulator off. The one thing I did notice when I went to go, you know, normally I would, you know, do this and then back that right off. The fitting is just spinning. So I'm going to show you kind of a little trick. Now, it sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. But there's only an O-ring on here that is holding, you know, that is kind of adding that extra grab that this, you know, bottom plug is doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it just a little bit, get that fitting to snug up a little bit inside the plug, and then I'm going to back it off. Now, again, you want to go gentle with it, okay? Because of the fact that it doesn't always work. Sometimes turning that fitting in that plug while it's on the regulator is going to make it stick even harder. This time around, it worked great. I could tell that it was going to anyway, because when I went to tighten this onto that, I saw the whole plug move. Again, spend a little bit of time when you're working on your gun and just watch what things do. You know, sometimes you can learn, you know, some new things. You can also learn, you know, the threshold and, you know, and its limit. You know, I saw the whole plug move a little bit, so I knew I was good to go. If it didn't move at that point, I probably would have stopped and I would have reassessed what I need to do. Because there's nothing worse than one of those being cinched onto this housing. They're very difficult to get undone without damaging, you know, stuff, of course. Now I'm just removing the velocity screw. And on the most of the G7 platform, you're going to have a small set screw in the front. You know, don't forget that. A lot of people do, and they shoot me messages, ask me, you know, hey, how come I can't get the reg housing out? You know, I'm bending tools and I'm trying to figure this out, and you know, I've got my threaded rod in there and I'm pulling and it just won't. And it's just like, yeah, because it's got a little tiny set screw in the very front that a lot of people won't, you know, necessarily think about it, because most of the other platforms never had that. So now we've gotten to that point where I want to go ahead and I want to take the reg housing out. So I've got my threaded rod. I want to say it's a 3mm. Go ahead and pull that right out of there. And you can see this is, you know, well greased, probably over greased, but you know, sometimes it's better to overgrease than to undergrease. And I'm only saying that because Angels do, you know, like to be lubed properly, you know, and they like, you know, their grease. They don't, you know, it's not a big thing, you know, a big deal to put a little extra on it. The one thing that I've noticed recently is that there was a discussion on bolt greasing and oiling, and someone came in and, you know, into the discussion and referred to everybody as sheep if they believe that you're not supposed to grease or oil your bolt. The fact of the matter is, we all understand if something's greased or oiled that it's probably going to run a little bit slicker, it's probably going to have less wear. The problem that we run into is, let's say worst case scenario, you go ahead and, you know, you heard that it's okay to oil your bolt. You go ahead and you throw, you know, you've got a thing of Remington gun oil sitting in your you know, toolbox. You go ahead and throw that on there. You don't realize that you know, oil, you know, especially non-synthetic oil, will swell the bolt. And you go ahead and you air it up and you start using it. And you notice something's off a little bit, but you can't figure out what it is. And, you know, and you start shooting, you go out and you play out and, you know, out in the woods, and you're shooting, and all of a sudden the gun starts acting up. Almost kind of like, you know, the bolt sticking forward and whatnot. And you're just like, you know, maybe it's just, you know, maybe it's the oil. So you take the bolt out and you wipe it down and you throw it back in. You notice it's kind of, you know, goes in a little bit more difficult than before. Now, at this time, what you're doing is when you put the bolt back in and you get it all ready to go, is you're putting unnecessary stress on your ram. Now, G7s are very hardy. Their rams are rugged. I've only seen 2 that have ever gone bad, and I believe one of them was from user error. The other one was just strictly it, you know, lost its internal O-ring suction. They're not rebuildable. You have to send them out to get them machined, just like the A1 ram. But if that happens, yes, you can always take the bolt and you can always put a new bolt in and away you go. But the fact of the matter is if you're at the field and you want to use your gun and you don't realize what you're doing or what's happening, you could end up causing yourself, because you're worried about a little bit of wear in the breech, you could end up causing yourself a new bolt and a ram. Again, worst case scenarios, but we're going to point them out to you because of the fact that that's what happens. Worst case scenarios are exactly what happens when Angels, you know, go belly up or there's any problems. I've seen a lot of bad things. People lose these knobs and then they try prying this open. All kinds of little things that just essentially turn guns that were once beautiful into not so beautiful. Okay, so right now what we've got is we've got this whole we've got all of the, you know, all the regulator is removed, and if you notice, that's not going to cut it. So I always have longer Allen keys just for this purpose, and of course the leverage isn't there, so you can go ahead and use, normally I use my adjustable wrench, but I am failing to see where it is, so I'll just go ahead and use my Leatherman. No big deal. Pliers are pliers. That was actually really tight, considering that it doesn't need to be. Not that way anyway. You know, that was kind of excessive. Again, there's an O-ring down here, believe it or not. Very little, you know, very little tightening is needed in order for it to seal up properly. If you have to really crank on anything on an Angel in order to get it to seal up, then the O-ring is probably shot. Yes, O-rings go bad. We all know this, and you know, for the most part, you can tell right away. You know, but certain ones, like this little guy underneath here, they get flat, and you know, they get, you know, as soon as they get a flat edge, and as soon as they don't start rebounding anymore, then you know, you're gonna need to locate another one. Now, the one thing I did notice is when I was taking this one off, this one, yeah, It's not bad, but it's starting to get round, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to put that off to the side because I don't want to reuse it again. The one thing I was going to point out to you too is this O-ring is not just a basic everyday O-ring. It's actually a shaped O-ring, in which this one's probably fine because Jason would have told me if it wasn't. So we're going to reuse it. And the only time I really tend to reuse, any sort of seal is when it's unique. And this is a very unique one. You're not going to find another O-ring to really fit this, there's a lot of turns, there's a lot of sharp edges and, sharp turns and stuff like that. So I would recommend, if you can reuse that one, I'd recommend doing so. Just because it will save you in the long run. And I think you'd find that you become very aggravated by trying to fit a regular O-ring in here. I mean, let's see if we can do it. See, again, they might. I mean, I've got a bunch of different O-rings. Let's see if we can get one to actually stay in here, properly. That one's pretty close. I mean, that's the second biggest one that I've got. And the unfortunate is the next size up is humongous. It's actually the one that the A1 uses for the front block. Or the next size up from that would be the LED solenoid O-ring, which is a big hoop. So you can see, I mean, it's not going to stay in place. Plus it also is cutting corners. So again, reuse the shaped O-ring that comes in this as long as it's, as long as it's in good shape. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to remove the eyes, and I'm only going to point this out kind of like, because it seems a little bit out of like what we're doing, because I could take the back plate off, I could take the front plugs out, but I'm going to remove the eyes mainly because they're dangling down here, and I really, I just, having worked on these for so long, I have had it happen, and I've been flipping over a body, especially with the stock eye ribbon, and I've had the little piece hook on my mat and go to flip over the body and just torn it right out. And it's like, there's nothing more aggravating than having to tell your customer, hey, by the way, it's going to be another couple of days because I tore up your eyes while I was taking your gun apart. It doesn't happen that often, but when it does happen, it's extremely frustrating. And one other thing I just noticed is this eye cover screw is toast. These are very unique to this platform, just because of the fact that they're not found anywhere else. Like with the LCD, they're found, they hold down the board, and they also hold on the back plate. These are only found right here. The one thing I do tell people is when these start to round, if they start to round or they start to strip or whatever, get rid of them, get new ones, because these strip, you are in for a good old time. And I'm talking about like not the good old time that you would think, because it's recessed and because it's small, I've seen these eye covers get destroyed when people try using drill bits. People try using easy outs because they're so small. They slip off, they go across the eye cover, they go across the body. I just get rid of them altogether because, like I said, this one's in good shape. I don't know if you can see it, but this one's in good shape. This one's actually got a bubble where it's been stressed, and so this one's no good. Just go ahead and throw that one right out. I've got plenty of those anyway. So now I'm going to go ahead and, we pull the detents out and take a look at those, make sure there's no flat spots. These are, in great shape. They look like they're new, which is always nice. And then you go ahead and you just take off the eye cover. the strap. One thing I like to do is I like to check it, make sure it doesn't have a lot, it doesn't have paint or anything or grit or dirt, because it's, can be exposed to a lot of things, when you're out and about. So I like to make sure that these are nice and clean. They can dry out too, and when they do, they can split. So I try to tell people that, when taking these apart, inspect them, make sure that they're in good shape. And now we can just take the eyes out. And as you can see, these are wired eyes. They're actually they're going to be more rugged. They're going to have, a really good, they're pre-molded. Pat does a great job with that. His soldering is, amazing. And, like I said, you can get these in a bunch of different colors. The LEDs are super bright. And they work really well. Again, he's a really good guy. If you want, a good upgrade, then I would recommend you can go right on eBay. You can purchase them, from there, underneath Doc's, Angel Laser Eyes, or Angel-aps-Wdp.com. He has, again, they can be made for all different platforms, and you can buy adapters if you want to run them in, another gun. Again, he's kind of the go-to guy for those. Now, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and tear down the regulator. We kind of, went on to the eyes thing, because after I got everything taken off and I got the regulator housing off, it left the eye ribbon exposed, like I explained to you before. I like to be able to take that off. So now we've got the circlips and pliers, and we're going to go ahead and pinch that together. The one thing I like to do when doing this is I like to keep everything kind of contained. I put my hand over the reg housing as I'm pulling this apart, because if that flies out of this area, it's probably not going to be found again. I swear these things just blend in to wherever, and they just disappear. A little while ago, I had one actually fall just like that, and it's a darker, matte, so it disappeared, and I was looking for it for like a minute or two until I realized that there's no way that it could have gone anywhere else other than just right here. And then I looked down, I just happened to get it, a little bit of a shine off of the light. But again, contain that and you don't have to worry about it. All right, here's where the Leatherman comes into play. It's a nice flat surface, it's hard, and we can, tap that right out. There's that half, and there's that half. This is all pretty standard stuff. You can find the shim, direction right in your manual if you have one. If you don't, you can look it up online, and it's really, really basic. They go, opposite each other throughout the stack. The one thing that we're going to do is we're just going to look at the O-rings. A lot of the times the original O-rings are still great, and they're in really good shape. So if they are, you don't have to swap them out. If they rebound properly when you go and you push into them, they're not jelly or they're not, they don't stretch out. Then I would say you're probably good to go. Put a little bit more grease on there, and and that would be fine. The one thing I do like to take a look at is the piston seat, essentially where the mini piston and the bigger piston meet. There's a sealing property right there, and that surface has to be clean. Also has to be free of any sort of damage. Most of the time they'll be fine. The one thing that you want to do is when you look at the mini piston is you want to look at the tip. The tip has a pressed in O-ring, and if that O-ring's missing, you're going to probably experience really high velocity because of the fact that you're allowing a lot of air to just go right through through here and then continue on. So make sure that this O-ring is still present, and also make sure it's raised up. If it's squished down or it's flat and it's like to the point where this part of the piston is touching this part of the piston, you're not going to get a good sealing property. So therefore, you know, you want to look for a replacement. Typically, I have these in stock, and it's always nice to check them, you know, on occasion. They don't go bad that often, but when they do, you'll start getting erratic velocity, and it's just kind of like one of those, you know, telltales. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I think I'm going to go ahead and remove the battery. It comes out the back, like a lot of the later platforms. So there's one screw in the back, and you just go ahead and back that out. Normally there would be a lever right here that would goes across, covers up the on-off switch. I'll show you what that looks like. This gun does not have it, but normally one would go, and it would be just like that. There's a small set screw right there, in which you would have to back that off first. So like, say, this one, you turn it like this, and it lifts up a little bit, and then the set screw is right there. You're going to want to use your smallest Allen key, and you back that out, and then you go ahead and lift that up out of the way. Then at that point, you can take this screw off. It's a really small little cap screw, and you can pull the back plate right off. What I'm doing now is I am backing off the back plate from the on-off for the battery. There's a small little O-ring, and that actually serves a really great purpose, because if you still have the lever and you have this and it sticks out too far, it will hit it every time, and it could turn your gun on, it could shut it off, depending on how you have it situated. So I'd always recommend making sure that that O-ring is there. That way when you screw this back on, you don't go too far or too little. Sometimes if it's not, you know, if it's like that, you wouldn't be able to really get in there to turn it on and off. You know, Angel did a whole bunch of things that were kind of quirky, and everybody kind of like, you know, they question why they did it. But the fact of the matter is, everything works together with an Angel. So, you know, there's a rhyme and reason for it. You put the O-ring on the back, it allows for the lever to shut, and it also allows for just enough room for you to be able to, you know, turn the switch on. Genius. All right, and like I said earlier, the battery comes right out the back, but what we want to do first, now that we've got the back plate off and we've got it detached from the battery, we're going to want to go ahead and take the solenoid cover off, because you can't take the battery out without the solenoid being removed, because if you do, or if you try, there's wires back here, and the battery will just run into them. It just makes everything harder. So there's one little screw on the very top of the plate. You remove that. Again, a little pick tool or something of that nature always helps. You just go in there, just pop that loose, and then you can back out your solenoid, just like that. Now, when you're removing the battery, you're going to want to take the plug and fish it back through the body, because if you don't do that, you won't be able to get the battery out, because everything has a way that goes in and out. You know, that's the beauty of it. It's just like a big puzzle, and then you can go ahead and you pull the battery out. Take this time right now to kind of put in a little bit of a plug. This battery is made by George. He's online, and he's on Facebook a lot, but he's actually sells these battery packs through angelpaintballparts.com, or you can find him on most of the Angel forums. And number one, awesome battery packs. They fit. The wiring he uses is super flexible, and allows for it to be like that, whereas original wiring will tend to give you a little bit of a problem if you start to try to bend it and you start to try to kink it. You know, I've seen the wires have gotten brittle over age, and I've seen them break. You know, so he got smart, and he made he used a very flexible wire, rubber coated wire, and like I said again, his battery packs are awesome, and they come with a warranty, a guarantee that they're going to work. And if you ever run into an issue that you get one and right off the bat it doesn't, then give him a shout and he will make it right. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove the body pins that are holding the internals in place. I just kind of go through here. Actually, you know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold off on the ram, mainly because of the fact that I want to be able to get the bolt out. And if I take the pin out for the ram, then the ram could just spin and spin and spin. I won't be able to get the bolt out. But there's that. When taking the ram out and the bolt, just like I did there, go ahead and inspect the bolt. This one's brand new, so it's no big deal. It's not going to be damaged or anything like that. But make sure the soft face is still is still there, is still intact. If it's torn, you can remove it. It won't give you the same advantage as a soft face, but you can still use the bolt. It's not junk, it's not garbage. Scuffing, heavy scuffing, gouging and stuff like that, the bolt can still be used, but unfortunately it's going to transfer its wear to your breech. So I do recommend at some point, if you're planning on running your gun for a long time, pick up an extra bolt. All right, so we go ahead and remove that body pin, and then we can pull the ram out. Like I said, the rams are very similar to A1s. In fact, I've actually seen a few people cross the two, and they've made a hammer that fits in an A1 because the G7 rams are so hardy, they last so long that it would almost be foolish not to want to put one in an A1, because then you wouldn't have to worry about the ram for a while. It's a pretty cool concept. Again, you're going to want to talk with a machinist, though, because taking one of these apart and doing everything that's required to be able to get it to that point where you can actually work on it does require a steady hand and the proper tools. But it does have one serviceable O-ring on the outside on the shaft, and then it's got the 3 right here. Again, when if you're going to take this ram apart and you want to take apart as much as you can, the set screw is probably going to be Loctited. Heat that up until you can smell it, and then when you can smell the Loctite softening up, then at that point you should be able to back that right off, and then you can replace this O-ring right here if you wanted to. Typically when putting everything back together, though, I like to throw a little bit of grease on there. I like to also make sure that the set screw for the hammer is tightened down. All right, so now we're kind of getting right down to the very end. So we're going to go ahead and take the front plugs off. You're going to find that, wow, incredibly torqued on there. You're going to find that that a good majority of these guns are going to be in good shape, mainly because of the fact that they are the kind of like the upper echelon of Angel. People tend to take really good care of these guns, but the one thing I do want to kind of point out to you is you have a couple of things that you want to look after when looking at one of these guns to purchase. One is the front, this front little hood right here tends to get damaged when people drop their guns, and it can bend down, and if it does, it can cause a barrel to not thread in properly. The other thing is the threads. You can see that there's very few. There's probably about three or five actual threads for the feed neck. Those get stripped out really easily when people take a traditional feed neck like this, because it's got a twist lock, and they put the hopper in, and then they try to turn the hopper, you know, and try to, as they're turning it, they don't realize that it can be turning in the body, and it will just start pulling the threads right out. I've seen that happen a number of times. It's very unfortunate. The other thing I like to point out is they milled a lot of this, a lot of the breech right down. And if you are, you know, lucky enough to be able to, when purchasing one, be able to get really good clean photos, so you can tell if this breech at any point had ever flipped open, because usually you'll end up with a dimple on the side of the body, and you'll also end up with a dimple like right up here. This one has not, but that's usually what happens when this flips open. And it also bends these the breech pins, because, you know, yeah, they're, you know, metal and everything like that, but the fact is they're still, you know, with a certain amount of force, anything can be damaged. So also look in this area right here. Make sure this area is not damaged. There's no splits. There's no you know, cracking, because if there is, honestly, it's so hard to justify at that point the repair that's needed. You know, you can get somebody to weld aluminum, awesome, but then you got to get somebody to anodize the gun after. And again, it's just, cost is just alarming. So, you know, a couple of things to look for when purchasing one of these is just keep an eye on the breech area, the feed neck, and the front hood where the barrel will screw in. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to push the internals out. That way we can take a look at them, make sure that they're in good shape. This you know, particular marker has the MT valve, or the Master Tech valve, which is, I'm going to kind of give you a rundown. There's a few differences. We get a lot of people asking that, you know, are in the now, you know, or in the know about, you know, the Master Tech valve. Master Tech, does it have the Master Tech valve? You know, everybody's, you know, automatically assumes that the G7 Flies came with them, but they didn't. Especially if you have a early version, it came with a traditional G7 ram, you know, valve, LPR. Nothing was different, nothing was upgraded, and the fact is it's not a given that your G7 Fly is going to have the Master Tech valve. Again, if somebody can show me a alarming advantage, then please do, because I would love to see it. Some people talk about weight reduction. Okay, sure. You know, no, I'll bite, you know, go right ahead. You know, do me a favor, though, and tell me when we're checking it out, you have, you know, a stainless, you know, yeah, it's got, you know, it's got a little bit of weight to it, right? Then you've got the aluminum, it's lighter, okay, but really, I mean, you know, we're not talking, you know, huge, vast differences here. Some people might say efficiency, you know, is greatly improved. But again, I would actually need to see numbers, you know, in which I've used both platforms. I've used ones that have had the Master Tech valve and ones that have had the regular valve train. And I can tell you that if there is a difference, it is not glaringly obvious. This is more a, you know, oh, my gun has this, you know, automatically it means it's better. But I think personally it's just a bit of hype. I know that they shoot just the same. You know, Angel had a lot of, they had a lot of hype. They had a lot of, you know, if they were selling a part that was supposedly better, they're going to tell you flat out, oh, this part's definitely a must-have, you know. I mean, come on. they're a business. That's what they're supposed to do. I mean, but honestly, when I go through my head and I start thinking about obvious upgrades, like when I think about like the A1, I think boost bolt, I think magno valve train, and that's about it. And I mean, I only think that because obviously magnets are going to be better than springs, and they're going to last longer than springs. I mean, this is all just basic, basic science here. So that would be the plus. The boost bolt, obviously, there has been recorded differences. The bolt will allow for lower operating, better velocity, better overall across the board consistency, which those are actual legit numbers. Whereas the Master Tech valve versus a G7 valve standard stainless steel, the numbers just aren't there, and I think it's just a personal preference, or it's just a boast. But right now what I'm doing is I'm backing off the set screws for the breech pins, and I'm doing that because I want to be able to remove the breech pins, and I get a lot of questions about breech pin removal, and I don't really think that it's a thing like people don't understand how to do it. I think what happens is a lot of people will see like a video, or they'll hear just part of the process, and so they'll go ahead and they'll be like, oh, I got the threaded rod, and I'm putting it in I'm putting it down in the hole, and I'm just not able to not able to pull it out. I don't understand why I can't. It's not coming out and whatnot, because they don't realize that there's a set screw in there that they have to take off first. It's always little things that you might miss. Again, it's the reason why some people will take screwdrivers to these when they can't open up the breech, because they don't realize that the breech pin, you pull on it, and for the earlier years, and it opens, and it allows for the block to open up, and those are the little things that are lost. And the thing is, with Angel, again, they over-engineered things, but we love that about them, because our guns are unique. They're high-tech. They're every little piece is intricate. Every little thing, a set screw to hold the pin in that holds the breech block, because no other gun has this. That was just amazing, and at least for me it was. I thought of their guns as like the Ferraris of paintball guns, because they were literally at the top of the food chain. They were destroying other people, out on the field. It was just, amazing firepower, and then they were beautiful, to say the least. And then there was their marketing, which is just amazing. Any time that you saw any advertising, you were going to be seeing some extremely hot women, and you were going to be seeing a lot of hype, a lot of just party, everybody kind of get involved. Made you feel like you were really kind of a rock star if you were shooting an Angel, which is unfortunately that's been lost nowadays. Now everything's kind of boring and basic and plain. I'm hoping that they can bring back marketing, and they can make you feel like a rock star again. But either way, like I said, with the Angel, you'll always feel that way, just because it's how we remember them. They weren't boring by any means. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and gonna pull this one pin out. It's pretty much going to come out anyway, because it's super clean. When taking these out, just make sure that you clean them off. And then one thing I do like to tell people is go ahead and put a little bit of grease on that when you go to put them back in. That way they'll come right back out just as easily as they did here. And you can see they're pretty. It's all pretty standard stuff. You're going to be able to get these to come right out. As long as the gun hasn't been soaked in water, dipped, I tend to tell people, if you're going to go ahead and you're going to clean your gun with soap and water, to make sure they have compressed air or something of that nature to be able to blow out all of the ports and all the areas, because you're going to find that water will make its way down into the body, or make it into the air passages. And trust me, it's just easier to make sure that all of that's out before you go and put your gun back together. And like you can see, there's a little bit of grease here. Not a bad thing, you know, we can deal with that. We can clean that up, and away we go. There you go, breech block off. Again, you can kind of look underneath here. You can see that, you know, it's in really good shape. It's not rounded out. You know, everything fits like it should. The one thing I do want to point out, just like with the A1, the breech seal is important for alignment for the bolt. If this breech seal is starting to lift, go ahead and just pull it right back out, clean it up, clean all the way down, get all the adhesive out, and then you can put a little bit of super glue. The one thing I have noticed is they have brushable super glue, which I love this because it's got a little brush applicator, and you can put a little bit. Trust me, it's like sliced bread. It's great. And then you can go ahead and you can reseat that, and then you can actually have it sitting like where it should be. And again, the you know, the overall goal is to make sure that your gun lasts as long as possible, and all these little things that I've kind of pointed out today will help you continue to use your Angel for years to come. Again, if there's any questions, you have any comments or whatever, go ahead and post them below, and I will get back to you. And if you are on Facebook, go ahead and like East Coast Angel NH. That's my page, and go ahead and check out the other Angel pages. You know, get involved. You know, with the community. We have a small community, but big heart. You know, everybody is involved. There's tons of knowledgeable people, and the one thing that's great about it is we all love the same guns. So even if you go to your local field and somebody makes fun of you for shooting an Angel because it's old or whatever else like that, you can always go online and you can take a photo of it and you can say, guys, how awesome is this? And we're going to agree with you. Again, thank you very much for tuning in. And if you have any questions or any comments, go ahead and post them below. And, you know, hopefully you'll check out my other videos while you're here. Thank you.